Now this is why I love to analyse trailers. There's something to really get excited about with this one. Our first look at 28 years later perfectly captures the original film's ominous ferocity, while elegantly preserving this sequel's secrets in quite a tantalising way. I wasn't sure where to begin with this, as it's been a while since I watched 28 Days Later, and already the internet is rife with speculation and fan theory surrounding the three survivors of the first film. However, after reading numerous comments, I share the sentiment that most other trailer agencies should take heed of the formula given to this spectacular marketing piece. Very well done, Sony, you picked the right people to promote Danny Boyle's eagerly anticipated return to a film that made one hell of a mark on audiences back in 2002, securing itself as a cult classic. I'd even confidently make the claim that much in the same way that the Blair Witch Project was able to completely turn upside down our perception of horror realism at the time, terrifying us in fact, 28 Days Later unapologetically paved new ground in the zombie genre and made us see the undead/mutated in a shockingly disturbing and intensely threatening new light. But here we are, over 20 years after the first film was released, and the director has been no stranger to putting out a few major hits with audiences since then. Notably, a personal favourite of mine was Sunshine from 2007. Now, that sci-fi horror film stayed in my head for quite some time, I tell you. So come June of 2025, we will get to see how Britain is faring after a 28-year lockdown. And we thought we had it bad with our ineffective COVID masks, consistent hand sanitising, and spatial awareness, which much to my annoyance I have always found lacking in most people anyway. Anywho, needing no introduction, the film stars Aaron Taylor Johnson, Jodie Comer, Ralph Fiennes, Jack O'Connell, and of course, Cillian Murphy is reprising the role of Jim once again. But apparently not how we think. So whatever twist this entails, I sincerely hope it stays wrapped up until release day. Another name you may not know is Alfie Williams, playing the young lad who appears to be apprenticing in the hunter's trade, under the teachings or custody of Aaron Taylor Johnson's character. Before we dissect, there are a couple of interesting facts worth knowing that may please you or at the very least make you curious. Firstly, they've already filmed 2 movies back to back. The film we're discussing and Part 2, named 28 Years Later The Bone Temple, which has been directed by Nia DaCosta and will arrive in January of 2026. But our man Danny Boyle has directed this summer's release, don't you worry. I'm also delighted to say that the writing credits for both films go to Alex Garland, who wrote the seminal movie. So for anyone who is a massive fan of these films, like myself, it's pretty mind-blowing to know we'll be getting a double dose of this world and just less than a year apart. Adding more attraction to it all is the odd fact that everything was filmed using iPhone Pros. The sensible explanation for this is that they wanted to achieve the same aesthetic consistency as the original film's gritty and raw visual style. And you know what, personally I've always been a big fan of found footage movies in particular for this very reason, as it brings me closer to believing what I see on screen when it has that low budget and authentic camcorder approach. A more cynical reason is that Apple simply donated a truck full of money in a publicity stunt to attract more eyes to their next iPhone Pro because, well, they wanted to sell more iPhones. Who knows? The trailer begins with a horrifyingly nostalgic glimpse into the past. And I'm not just speaking of the Teletubbies, oh no. They bring it all back with a strikingly swift and sobering reminder of how it all began. I speak of the initial outbreak and devastating violence we missed while Jim was deep into a coma for 28 days, waking up to the aftermath. Then we have a stunning aerial shot of the once holy island of Lindisfarne, located off the northeast coast of England. This fascinating and historical place boasts the beginning of Viking raids in 793 AD, as well as being a major centre of early Christianity in Britain. Now, considering the assumption that Britain has been avoided since the outbreak 28 years ago, it's intriguing that the film takes place here of all locations. Sure, it is incredibly strategic defence-wise, with its precarious single-access land bridge almost living in fear of a fast-approaching warmer climate washing it away. But are there religious connotations to consider also? This certainly becomes more compelling as the trailer unravels its cultish themes. As the sinister undertones slowly begin to emerge, Some semblance of order and society in this post-apocalyptic nation starts to take shape. Between the charmingly presented factions of community roles posted on the wall, and the seemingly peaceful and thriving marketplace, all appear secure and civilized, save for the foreboding warning signs dotted around town and the ever-watchful defensive perimeter that looks to be expecting an attack at any moment. But from who or what, I wonder? One of the many things this trailer does achieve very well is to hide what exactly has transpired in all of these years. Assuming we are dealing with a potentially evolving, mutating virus, as viruses do, actually that's what they do best, then what are the long-term effects of this change on humans? You'd also have to take into consideration how isolation from the rest of the world would impact the mindsets of survivors and small communities, since almost the entire UK population was either killed outright or became infected very early on. Therefore, I can only imagine there to be a harrowing existence behind this pleasant illusion of control and stability we see in town. Undoubtedly, their belief systems and moral principles would have shifted due to a detachment from technology, and ultimately adjusting to a stronger reliance on nature. But our first glimpse of bad behaviour is demonstrated by this wild bunch of nudists. Well, I guess some things never change, as they abruptly sabotage the protagonist's hunting trip and understandably send them fleeing. This is where the trailer starts to confuse us with its layers of mystery. On the one hand, the silhouettes of this excited crowd do show all the signs of infection as they twitch and flail their arms erratically into the air. But interestingly, we don't see their features nor do we hear them, leaving their humanity much in question. There is a strong possibility that the virus may have lost some of its potency over the many years, or rather it might have mutated into a series of variants that allow it to coexist in the human body, without starving and ultimately killing its host, as was witnessed in the early days. This favourable change might enable a sort of symbiotic relationship between virus and host, spelling so many possibilities for the story to play with, if indeed this is the case. One particular theory I have is that after such a lengthy time living with the virus in solitude, the remaining survivors may have formed various cults either out of fear or reverence, as perhaps some are in favour of worshipping this change. It's possible that if the virus has evolved to benefit both parties, then this transition could have become something highly sought after, like a rite of passage or transcendence if you will, a means to become more than human in the eyes of these paganistic post-apocalyptic cults having discovered a newly found religion to give life meaning once more. Another theory could divide England's remaining population into factions, each with opposing viewpoints. Whether these bone monuments serve as a warning or a holy place is yet to be understood, but although it's most likely that the majority of the uninfected remain vigilant and cautious of the virus, an obsessed extremist cult with viral samples in their possession and housing sinister intentions might also exist. Their motives could boil down to merely requiring a devastating bioweapon to lay waste to their rivals. Or is there something darker at play here that is more reminiscent of devil worship? This scene fascinates me the most, and kind of reminds me of how Saruman was birthing legions of Uruk-hai into the world in Lord of the Rings. Therefore, is this some form of summoning ritual performed by a nefarious cult who have adopted very distorted views and beliefs of what the virus is, and why it emerged in the first place? I'm intrigued by the amount of body mass here, as it clearly promotes that the film has something new to offer. Judging by the amount of forest camouflage acting as skin, it's almost like the virus has found a new way to integrate itself with nature. I just hope we don't get some kind of cheesy Swamp Thing cameo. This brings us nicely to something that stood out to me the most, and I had to rewatch it many times to get a better sense of scale. It seems to be carefully and cleverly downplayed by trickery with camera angles, quick edits and lighting. But is this thing that may be the same entity seen across multiple shots a giant? I mean, it's huge, right? Tell me I'm not alone in seeing this. It towers over the protagonists, who are running towards the camera and they are in the foreground. Moreover, there's a couple of frames within this dimly lit room where we momentarily see it rise above the soldiers, hoisting one of them up into a loving squeeze. Whether this killing machine is the product of natural selection and mutation as a result of years of viral evolution, genetically manipulating humans to be larger and more muscular, who knows? It looks and sounds absolutely terrifying though, and I cannot wait to see it all unfold. Although I can see this brute becoming the main threat the locals have to face, I wonder how far gone this person's mind is to the latest virus. Is there any trace of consciousness or memories from the individual that the infection hasn't completely overtaken? They've unquestionably made a very compelling piece of marketing for this film, you can't argue with that. Now I suppose the question on everybody's lips is, how does Jim factor into the sequels? Numerous articles and user threads have suggested that this infected individual could be the answer to Jim's fate. Largely the reason for this is due to the weight loss achieved by Cillian Murphy in preparation for the Oppenheimer role, which I find a little insulting on his behalf because I don't think it was quite that extreme. However, this was entirely debunked by one of the crew members, who even stated the name of the actor who was transformed into this walking corpse. Thankfully, this leaves us with many more questions and a wild curiosity as to why Jim was not rescued along with Selena and Hannah, as was suggested at the end of the first film. But also, what could have befallen them over 3 decades leading into this upcoming sequel? Was Jim able to keep his sanity over this period? Is he part of a faction or cult, a cult leader perhaps? Or is he more than human, if you take my meaning? Judging by these foreboding clues in the trailer, it could be a safe bet that he'll make one hell of an entrance, as he appears to be relatively anticipated, or perhaps even infamous by this point. As a fan, I don't want any aspect of this to be revealed in future trailers, please, as I believe there will be much more to gain from the cinematic experience if we don't know certain things. God, I hope the marketing people are listening. So, I think we can expect to encounter a mixture of malevolent and benevolent forces in Danny Boyle's next installment into the franchise, as well as that radically intense fear and disgust from his first film that was so shockingly palpable in almost every scene. As the trailer seems to imply, I can see this one stringing together many complex themes woven into the story with a far more desperate tone and significant risk factor involved, with there now being some semblance of a community trying to rebuild. I do appreciate the mixture of old and new, as demonstrated by contemporary military weapons and other ballistics, that are operated in harmony with the use of hunting bows and wooden fortifications to protect their settlements. I'm sure that will add some fun dynamics to the film as we drift away from the urban environments of the first 2 movies. The tagline in the trailer asks, "What will humanity become?" To me, this definitely speaks to some interesting implications, biblical or otherwise, that may touch upon some of my theories about accelerated human evolution caused by an advanced strain of the initial virus, one that has perhaps learnt to coexist, if only for its own survival. So if you couldn't tell, I'm very excited for this one, and I'm pretty confident it's going to feel extremely gritty, hauntingly raw, and explosively pacey. But don't take my word for it, as the trailer really speaks for itself. As we do get closer to the summer, I can see many of us rewatching the previous films, and we might even see theatrical re-releases of the first film. At least just to get us all in the mood and bring us up to speed. So how did you find the trailer? Did you get excited? Let me know down below. And I gotta say, I prefer my zombies to move a little faster than is tradition, but compared to World War Z, 28 might always be my go-to for this genre. All the best folks, and a very happy new year to you all. Take care, thanks for watching.